wasted too much time, but now I'm here and crying. I've been around the world and I can't find my baby. I don't know when, I don't know why he's gone away, and I don't know where he can be. My baby, but I'm gonna find him. Been around the world and I can't find my baby. I don't know when, I don't know why he's gone away, and I don't know where he can be. My baby, but I'm gonna find him.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. Oh, it works. The sound is good. How you doing? All good? Excellent. Just wait for the dulcet tones of the cover version of All Around the World by Lisa Stansfield to fade away and welcome you to the first ever programming summit at Radio Days 2025. You are in for a treat today. We've got lots of great stuff. My name is Nick Goodman. I'm a radio consultant. I'll be your host for the day. So I'm going to take you through the day. This is very much your summit. So very happy for you to get involved as much as you want. Your chance to ask lots of questions. We'll be sharing ideas up here. We'd love to hear your ideas as well. You can be part of the conversation, right? It's Sunday, so we can all be a little less formal and kind of chat amongst ourselves. We're all friends here together. So, what is coming up today? This is how the day is going to work. We've got 2 sessions this morning, okay, from 11 till 1 o'clock. There's a little kind of 2, 3, 4-minute break in between the two, so don't disappear and miss a load of stuff. First up, in just a moment, we're going to have Ben Cooper, who's going to kick things off with the 3 laws of how to grow a successful brand, and most importantly, be happy at work, right? We like being happy at work. That's what we want. At 12:05, it's the talent management Q&A with Dennis Clark from iHeartMedia. If you've ever seen Dennis speak before, he's phenomenal. He's a force of nature. There'll be no slides from him, no presentations from him. It's your chance to ask questions about talent and talent management. So have a little think now of the stuff that you want to chat about, maybe some issues you might have or things that he can help with. It's going to be a really great session. He's open for discussing all of that kind of stuff. So start thinking about those now. Then there's lunch. Woohoo! Upstairs. There will be lunch of some description. I don't know what it is. Don't blame me. I didn't pick it. It'll be nice, I hope. But there is lunch, okay. And then after lunch at 2 o'clock, we've got the start of a BBC double bill. We'll have Helen Thomas, head of BBC Radio 2. She'll share her insights into how to run your radio station in an ever-changing market. And we know that's tough, right? So we're going to have an interesting conversation about that. And then to finish off the day, Alan Hayden-Jones, head of BBC Radio 1, with 2 of his top producers, going to talk about the power of music and how you can connect to your audiences through music and using music as content. It's going to be a fantastic day with some great speakers. I'm contractually obliged to mention our gold sponsors. Oh, yes. Thank you to David Systems and to RCS and Radio Player and Xperi. What else? Housekeeping. There is a Wi-Fi network, RDE Mopod. You can just jump on that network. So if you want to do that, that's great. If you're on X, hashtag RDE25, that's cool as well. Swapcard is the app where you get all the info, right? So if you need info about what the sessions are, go to Swapcard. Any problems with Swapcard, the information desk upstairs will help you get on Swapcard. You can also, like TripAdvisor, you can rate the sessions in Swapcard, okay? Be nice. Be nice. Coffee at 3 o'clock. We're going to serve you coffee as well. Oh, yeah, we look after you, right? So that's all good. Any questions before we start? Is everyone good? Happy? All good, yeah? Everyone happy over here? Yeah? Okay, fine. All right. Should we get things started with the summit? Ben Cooper is the former Chief Content Officer for Bauer Media Audio UK and the former controller of BBC Radio 1 as well. So he's had some big jobs. And today he's going to talk about unlocking your success, enjoyment in your job. Please give a Radio Days welcome to Mr. Ben Cooper.
Thank you very much indeed to Nick, and thank you for coming along this morning. No, seriously, thank you, because it would have been really embarrassing if you hadn't. So really want to say thank you very much indeed for attending the session. So welcome to Athens. Athens is the home of Socrates. He was born in 469 BC. He was probably one of the most famous philosophers of Western society, and he often used to talk in the marketplace here in Athens. One morning, he was talking about philosophy, but people were walking by, they were busy. He was really quite annoyed. Apparently, he was quite a cantankerous man. So he decided that he would start to tell a story. And he started to tell a story about a merchant and a farmer walking up a hill on a very hot day. And the crowd started to sort of pay attention and sort of notice what was going on. And he told this story of the merchant, who had obviously a lot of money, talking to the farmer and saying, "Your donkey that you're walking with, if I pay you some money, will you let me ride the donkey up the hill on this hot day?" And the farmer says, "Yeah, okay, you can pay me some money." So the merchant gets on the donkey and starts riding up the hill. And now there's a crowd that started to gather and starting to listen to the story. Then the farmer says, "Look, it really is a very hot day and the donkey's getting tired. I think we just need to take a rest." And the merchant says, "Okay, all right, fair enough," gets off. And then the farmer sits down in the shadow of the donkey. And the merchant's going, "Whoa, hold on a second, I paid for the ride on the donkey." And the farmer's saying, "But you paid for the ride on the donkey, you didn't pay for the shadow of the donkey." And now there's a big crowd in the marketplace, and they're all kind of discussing this, of going, yeah, the merchant's right. No, the farmer's right. No. And Socrates stops, and then he walks off. And the crowd are going, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And they follow Socrates. They say, "Well, what happened? Was the merchant right? Was the farmer right? What happened?" And Socrates turns to the crowd in a really grumpy way and says, "I was talking about philosophy and you weren't interested. But I tell a story and a crowd comes." And then he walks off. And the one lesson that I think we can take from that, because philosophy is difficult, listen, but Socrates did know a thing or two, is that we're talking today and over the next few days about the fact that you tell us a good story, you can get an audience in a marketplace. So that's what we're going to talk about today, storytelling. I'm also going to tell you about a load of books that I've read over the last few months and things that I've stolen from those books, and then I'm going to tell you about. This is a really big read. It's not the easiest of reads, but my God, it's a very valuable read. And I think if you're interested in knowing about the future of storytelling, it tells the story of telling stories in the past, in the present, and in the future in terms of AI. But there's a great quote in here which says, "Human minds rely on stories and on story architecture as the primary roadmap for understanding, making sense of, remembering, and planning our lives. Lives are like stories because we think in story terms." You think about the start, middle, and end. You think about school years. You think about work years. You think about retirement. It's got a story arc. So that's what I want you to take. The first thing that I want you to take from this session is that actually we are storytellers in a marketplace trying to grab an audience. But that marketplace is changing. So you're all comfortably sitting now in your seat. Probably you've got your phone out. If you haven't got your phone out, get your phone out. Go to settings. Okay? This is the interactive part of the session. Okay? So go to settings in your phone. Go down to screen time. There's some groans already coming. I can hear them. have a look at what your daily average is. Okay? You got that? Right, everyone stand up. Here we go. Let's have a look and see how bad you really are. You can sit back down if your daily average screen time is less than an hour. Anyone sitting down? No. Okay, less than 2 hours. Oh dear. Less than 4 hours. Oh, okay. Okay. That's pretty good. Now it gets interesting. Less than 5 hours. Less than 6 hours? 7 hours? I've got 3 people here. 8 hours? You're supposed to sleep for 8 hours a day. 9? 10?
I'm cheating. I switched it off. I don't want to know.
Sit back down. Right. On average, thank you for that. On average, you will scroll on social media every day the equivalent height of Big Ben. That's why there's a picture of Big Ben up here, so you can remember it. Every day, you will scroll the equivalent height of Big Ben looking at stories. They're not traditional stories, they're not the sort of stories that you get in a book or in a letter, but they are stories. They might even only be 8-second stories. Best 5 restaurants to eat in Athens. How to stay healthy in your 40s. But they're little stories, and that's what you're up against. So today, I'm going to tell you about creating a brand, creating a narrative of storytelling, how you can cut through with your stories in that marketplace. Okay? So, I finished work at Bauer last year, and I did a leaving speech. Some people quote Shakespeare, maybe. Some people quote maybe a poet. I quoted Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Very good.
Great film from the 80s, and there's an amazing quote which says, "Life's pretty busy, and if you don't stop once in a while and take a look around, you might miss it." And so today I want to talk about the fact that I went on a little bit of a journey, had a bit of a break from working 5 days a week, read a lot of books, and tried to work out what I wanted to do next and what would give me satisfaction, what would make me happy, and what was important to me. So, as I said, I did a lot of reading. This is one of the better books. It's Ikigai. It sounds a bit like something Bruce Willis says in Die Hard without the swearing. But it's actually the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. Very easy read, and it boils down to a Venn diagram. I don't know if many of you maybe seen this, but it's working out what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Quite important. And that intersection between some of those things gives you things like passion, gives you vocation, gives you mission, etc. Now, this is, a Japanese sort of model that has lasted generations and years. But obviously, working in the radio industry, it wasn't good enough for me. It needed to be the power of 3, and it needed to be alliteration. So what I did was I looked at that and I thought, actually, do you know what? What is it important to me? What's important to radio? I think there are 3 things that can be summed up in. So on our journey, what are those 3 things? First one is passion, having a passion. You're here, you left your loved ones, got on an aeroplane and came to Athens because you have a passion for radio. That's what unites everyone in this room, is having a passion for radio. Also, the other P that I think is important is purpose. What is your purpose? What are you doing on this planet? What's your purpose in your job? And the third one is people. People is the third one. I want to keep working with great people. I want to keep learning. I want to be able to say, oh yeah, that was a great meeting actually, rather than, God knows what that meeting was about the new HR structure. I have no idea. Passion, purpose, people. Those are the three things. Those are the three keys that I believe are going to be important to you building a successful brand for your radio station, but also is worthwhile you thinking about personally. So let's look at those three P's in the two jobs that I've done. I worked at Bauer, and Bauer doesn't have any news stations or speech stations, it's music stations. And they have a range of music stations, and the thing that unites that portfolio is the passion that people have for their music, the stories they tell about the music that they love. So whether it be Magic at the Musicals, who did a fantastic event at the Royal Albert Hall in London, or whether it be in a muddy field for Download Festival, where Kerrang and Planet Rock tell stories about great rock music that's going on, and that community of rock fans that have gathered in that muddy field and very smelly toilets. That passion also can be for a single band as well. Doesn't necessarily need to be a genre. So Hits and Absolute Radio told the story of Coldplay performing at Shepherd's Bush Empire in London. Fantastic small little gig for the band that tours the world in huge stadiums. And they broadcast that gig, and we had the rights, the audio rights to that concert, and we told the story of Coldplay. When it comes to purpose, we know that obviously in commercial radio, you've got to hit the bottom line. You've got to make money. And in public service radio, you have to do the public service remit. The purpose, though, I love to define through this book. Alistair Campbell, who was a spin doctor, famous spin doctor for Tony Blair in the UK. And this is another good book, because it not only tells great stories of people who are fantastic in their field and their line of work, but it also summarizes most management courses in a few chapters at the beginning and saves you a lot of time and effort. So, definitely recommend Winners by Alistair Campbell. He came up with this, which I've been a huge fan of, and I definitely would say that you should take away from today. Simplest way to view strategy is to consider three letters that have been on my desk and on the inside cover of my notebooks since 1994. O for objective, S for strategy, T for tactics. I've used those in both jobs at Radio 1 and 1Extra, and it gives you a clear story to your staff. That importance of not only telling great stories to your audience, but telling great stories to your staff. So, what was the objective, strategy, and tactics at Bauer? Well, it was to win new audiences in new ways. It was a very traditional set of radio stations that we had, and we had to evolve. Our audiences were evolving. Your audiences are evolving. That attention span of looking on their phones, the height of Big Ben every day, you're fighting against that. Your phone is a weapon of mass distraction, and you've got to fight against that. So the objective at Bauer was to win new audiences in new ways. How are we going to achieve that objective or that purpose? Well, it was through a strategy of the 4 L's. Listen, making sure that we not only had great radio, traditionally that went out, but also that we did podcasting, and that also we looked at the coverage that we were getting. So with Bauer, we were through mergers and acquisitions, had patches of the country in the UK that weren't covered by FM. So actually going around and buying stations. So not only looking to the future of listening, but also making sure that you make the best of old technology. So listen, look. In a focus group, I love this quote from a young lady. She said in the focus group, she said, if I didn't see it on my phone, it didn't happen. You're like, oh God, that's my work. We planned that project for weeks. If it's not on my phone, it didn't happen. So making sure that your best bits, your best interviews, your best snippets of content, your best stories are represented on those platforms. Live. If I was to ask you individually, what was your first ever concert that you went to? I bet you could all think about it and you remember it. It's a moment. And that connection between an artist, the audience, and the radio station that's bringing you a live event, That's a real connection, a real sense of community. So we wanted to make sure at Bauer that we had great live events like the one I told you about at the Royal Albert Hall, because there's that connection, there's the hairs on the back of your neck that stand up. And again, if I was to ask you about concerts that you've been to with your friends when you were growing up, it wouldn't be about the fact that you go, oh yes, actually Radiohead played their third track off their second album. You'd tell me about the fact that actually your friend got so drunk in the pub beforehand he couldn't remember the actual gig. Or that you went to a festival and you lost a friend who got locked in a portaloo. It's about the stories that come with those live events. And then local. I know there's a lot of changing stations now to be networked, but I still believe in that local news and local adverts and local information and local voices. Because if anyone ever mentions Bromsgrove, you've all heard of Bromsgrove, haven't you? Of course, yeah. Worcestershire, you know Bromsgrove. No one's heard of Bromsgrove. Bromsgrove gets mentioned on the radio, my ears prick up, and I'm there, I want to know more. So that localness, again, was a key thing in Bauer, making sure that you had that local news service telling local stories. So that was the strategy, and then the tactic was KISS. I told you I was going to talk about how to KISS. KISS, not the station, but keep it simple, stupid. That was the tactics. If we were to achieve the strategy, and if we were to get the strategy right, we'd achieve the objective. There's a great book by Rick Rubins, who's the record producer, and he's got this book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being, and he quotes a jazz musician, brilliant jazz musician called Charles Mingus, who once said, "Making the simple complicated is commonplace." We've all been in stations and organizations like that. But making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. And we certainly had that issue in both the BBC and Bauer, where through no fault of their own, things just got complicated. And people would spend their time feeding the machine of that complexity rather than spending their time on creativity and telling great stories. So if you can, how do you make your organization as simple to navigate as possible so that you spend your time at work on the fun bits, the creativity? Also, the third P, people. Greatest Hits Radio managed to get the most listened to music presenter in the UK, Ken Bruce. And that was a coup for commercial radio, taking him from the BBC to commercial radio. And it got front page news in the national newspapers, which is, again, a rare thing these days. But everyone just saw him and talked about Ken Bruce. But that's a bit like just talking about Messi. It takes a team of people. And Messi can't take on a whole football team. He can't save the penalties. He can't take the free kicks and score the header. Messi is a fantastic player, but he needs a team around him. And my message to you is about getting that team ready. I'll talk about the schedule here for Bauer, but then I'll also talk about staff in BBC. But with Greatest Hits Radio, it was about getting the team right, making sure it was a diverse set of presenters. When I went to Greatest Hits, it was all white men from 6 a.m. in the morning on Monday to 10 o'clock on Friday. That was not going to be the way forward for that station to get audiences if it was to really increase its listenership. So bringing in a team, bringing in Jackie and Kate and Jenny, and making sure that you build up that layers of complexity in your schedule and that variety and diversity in your schedule. Because it's about getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right seats. We had Simon Mayo, who was doing drive time on another station. He was on the bus, but he was on the wrong seat. So he moved him over to Greatest Hits. And then when you've got Jackie and you've got Kate and you've got Jenny and others, and then you've got Simon, that's when you can go and talk to Ken Bruce and say, would you like to join this team? And you can see that it's a much more complex, more diverse team. So it's about getting the people right and about making sure It's a great team. So those are the 3 Ps in commercial radio that I used at Bauer. I also used them when I look back at my time at the BBC as well. So, what were those 3 Ps? Passion, purpose, and people. So, the BBC, how did it work with public service? Again, passion. Getting presenters who are passionate about talking to the stars of the day. Greg James, our breakfast show presenter, taking Taylor Swift for a drive around London and getting beeped at by various people who went, "Is that Taylor Swift that just went past in a car?" Yeah, it was, blimey. Okay, so whether it be Taylor Swift being interviewed or whether it be Bruno Mars has got a new album out, what's the story about that? How do we tell that story? Let's get him in and get him to perform in the live lounge. That passion for telling stories about new music. And also, Radio 1's Big Weekend. Taking stars from Hollywood Hills to places like Middlesbrough. We took Miley Cyrus. This is Miley Cyrus in a field in Middlesbrough with about 50,000 people. And you tell the story of the artists, but you also tell the story of young people in the Middlesbrough area. Those telling stories and having that passion for that story. So that was the passion, was the music. The purpose, again, using OST, was to win new, young, and diverse audiences to the BBC. That was the thing that you told your staff all the time. That's the story that we need to do. That's the purpose. The strategy was listen, watch, share. Create content that you can listen to, you can watch, and you can share. Really simple. Especially for that girl who said, if it's not on my phone, it didn't happen. And then the tactic was turning stumblers into seekers. People who stumble in that scrolling for the height of Big Ben every day, can you grab their attention with something that makes them laugh or tells them something that they didn't know? And the more times you can grab their attention, the more times they're going to stumble across your content and go, do you know what? Actually, that's a brand that I really like. I'm going to follow it. And the more they follow it, the more content they'll get, and hopefully then you'll turn them from stumbling into your content, into seeking out your content, and actually listening to your radio stations. So that was the tactic that we had at the BBC. And the final P, people. I talked about people in terms of a team, on-air team at Bauer. For me, at the BBC, it was about the staff and about the team. One thing that I would love you to do, not now, but maybe when you're back on the plane or something going back home, think about the time that you enjoyed work the most. When was that? What period of time did you absolutely jump out of bed in the morning and want to get to work? Have a think about when that was. And then try and identify the characteristics of that time. What was it about that time that meant you loved your work so much? And for me, when I did that exercise, it was about the team of people. There was something about the energy we had at work. There was something in the zeitgeist. There was something about the fact that it wasn't political. Everyone had their own lane to run in. Everyone was supportive. And you meant that you spent your time not on the politics of the office, but you spent it on the creativity of the output. And that, for me, was a fantastic time. So have a think about, when did you enjoy your job the most, and what were the characteristics of that? And can you recreate those moments? Can you recreate a great team? So, passion, purpose, and then people. Now then, just going to see whether I can remember what my next slide is. Oh yes, that's one. Right, you've been sitting listening, and you're very, very kind, and you've been very attentive. There's not many of you that have been reading and updating your socials, so thank you for that. What I want you to do now is think of a number between 1 and 10. Okay, got that? Could you times it by 9? Now, some of you are changing your number now, aren't you? I can see your brains working. Right, choose a new number between 1 and 10. Times it by 9. If you've got 2 digits in your number, add those 2 digits together. Okay? Now take away 5. Got it? and you should have a single number. Now, put a letter attached to that number. So if it was 1, you'd have A. If it was 2, it'd be B, etc. If you got a letter. Think of a country that begins with that letter. Got one? Now go to the next letter in the alphabet and think of an animal that begins with that letter. Okay? Some people are giggling, they know this. I think you'll find I'm a magic person. You don't get many elephants in Denmark.
Yeah.
So, if you want to see elephants, don't go to Denmark. I went to Botswana. This next section of the presentation is about you as a person and taking those 3 Ps and actually thinking about them for your brand, the story you tell about yourself. I had the most amazing holiday. It was a holiday of a lifetime. I realized that most of my career, I'd only taken a week's holiday. I had maybe 10 days at a time, but I'd never taken a 2-week holiday, not for ages. And having 2 weeks with my wife and my kids looking at elephants in Botswana was just the most amazing time. And with this bit about looking at ourselves, I'm going in reverse order, so it's going to be people, and then purpose, and then passion. So, how do you want to spend your time? What people do you want to spend your time with? And this is about trying to get that balance. There are friends for a reason, there are friends for a season, and there are friends for life. How often do you see those lifelong friends? I always remember as a kid, my parents would say, "Oh, our friends are coming to see us this weekend." And I'd be like, "I don't even know who they are. Who are they? We see them maybe twice in my lifetime." It's like, I couldn't understand. If they were friends, why didn't we see them more often? And there's a great story of a guy who, in America, worked out that he was living in New York, miles away from his parents, and he worked out that he only really saw his parents because he had to fly back to see them for Thanksgiving and for his birthday. So he saw them twice a year. And then he worked out the average age expectancy of his parents, and he realized that he was only going to see them possibly another 15 or 16 times in his life. I lost my dad when I was 30 in a car accident. And my mum, during COVID, got dementia, and we had to move her into a home, and sadly, we lost her a couple of years ago. So I don't have that time with my parents. So would you rather be in a meeting about the new accountancy system online at your work? Would you rather actually be planning a proper, creating a memory moment with your parents, or your family, or your partner, or your loved ones, or your friends? It's a lesson that I certainly look back at my life and I wish that I had got better, and I wish that I had spent time with people that I cared about rather than actually chasing some new promotional work moment. So that thing about people, how are you wanting to spend your time? If you want to be happier in life, really think about how you're going to spend your time. Purpose. When I look back at my work, yes, we had to make money at Bauer and hit the bottom line, but did that make me jump for joy? Well, it gave me a bonus. That was nice. But did it really satisfy my soul? And in terms of the BBC, yes, bringing in new audiences to the BBC and to public service was great. But actually, when I look back at my work, I look at it and I go, we worked with William and Kate, the future king and queen, celebrating young people in society. We did something called the Teen Awards. Young people are phenomenal. If you look at who cares for people in society, quite often it's the young people who are caring for a parent or caring for a sibling. They're raising money for charity, or they care passionately about the environment or other issues. So celebrating young people and bringing them to Kensington Palace to meet the future king and queen, that was something that I was really proud of, because it was being a force for good in society. And that really meant something. And at Bauer, we had a charity called Cash for Kids, helping some of the poorest young people in the country. But it was a charity that was on only a couple of stations. So one of the proudest things that I did at Bauer was actually making sure that every station in the portfolio did a day where we raised money for Cash for Kids. We had Mission Christmas, and we had an amazing day, and we raised over £1 million for charity. That, to me, is much more purposeful, being a force for good in society. That makes me much happier about my work than making profit for a business. Obviously, you have to do both. Which comes to passion. This is me presenting my first ever radio show at age 20. I did drive time on BBC Hereford and Worcester, the talk of two counties, from the Black Country to the Black Mountains. I could do the frequencies, but I won't. Funnily enough, no one else wanted to do New Year's Eve drive time, but I did. And so this was my first ever show. I'm passionate about radio, always have been. And I'm passionate about the storytelling that radio can do. Because just down the hall, there's a big session going on all day about the future of AI and radio. Radio, if it's curated by human beings, will tell stories that aren't created by algorithms. They're created, and there's going to be serendipity on your airwaves. And that is so essential, because I don't want storytelling to be owned by just a few tech people in California. I want you to be the storytellers for your community. I don't want it to be done by AI and a computer. I want it to be you connecting with your audience, creating a community that says, do you know what? This is a story that happened to me this morning, and it made me think. And your listeners go, yeah, that happened to me. And that connection, that sense of community, I think relies on human beings. And I want it to continue. And that's why I got on a plane and flew to Athens, because I love radio and I want to hear your stories over the next few days in all of the sessions. So, people, purpose, passion. 3 keys to making your brand as a station really become a very successful storyteller in the marketplace, but also 3 things for you to think about. Well, I'm going to end where I began, with Socrates, grumpy old sod, quite clever, and he said this quote, "I cannot teach anyone anything. I can only make them think." So my last thing to you is, when you clean your teeth tonight, hopefully tonight, maybe you forget, had a few too many red wines. When you clean your teeth tomorrow morning, remember this session and just go through, what is it that you want to do when it comes to working with the best team, when it comes to a real purpose? Can you be a force for good in your society? And can you continue that passion for radio, telling stories that are curated by humans and not AI? Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Take a seat. Give me some water. Okay. I got some questions. You may have questions as well. So we have a roving microphone, so if you want to have it's at the back. If you want to have a question, have a little think about it. I'm going to pose a couple. Thank you for that. Some really interesting stuff, heartfelt about your parents as well, and capturing the moment, all that kind of stuff. Really, really important, because we get so busy in our work life. Sometimes we get caught up with all the things that we're focused on, and we've got to kind of take a moment as well. So I thought that was really, really interesting. A couple of things for you, Ben. Bauer, let's get straight into it. Bauer had some really good successes while you were there. Is there one thing you'd point to and say, we did this thing that caused all that audience growth? Was it the signing of Ken Bruce or the launching of Greatest Hits Radio? Is there one thing that stood out for you in that time?
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, in 4 years, we grew the audience by 20%. And it went up to 24 million listeners a week across the UK. Very successful time of growth. And I've been thinking about this. The important factor is that there is no one factor. Actually, it was a range of things. It was making sure that everyone knew the clarity of that story of what's our purpose, what's our objective, what's the strategy, the 4 L's, and what's the tactics. And so it was a combination of, yes, getting the best DJs on air, but it was also making sure the music policy was right. It was about getting the production right. It was about getting the distribution right. It was getting, again, that sense of team and the fact that everyone was in it. I love the story of the President of the United States going to NASA and goes to, as the Americans would call it, the restroom. And there's a guy in the restroom cleaning the floor. And the President says, "Oh, what do you do here?" He said, "Oh, sir, I'm here to put a man on the moon." And it's that thing of everyone knowing what they're doing in the team.
You're leading big teams in these organizations. What's the kind of leadership lesson that you learned from that? Is it that exactly everybody needs to be facing in the same direction? You're like, this is the direction, follow me. Is that the kind of thing you learned from that?
No, I think that just the opposite, actually. The thing that has changed in leadership over the time that I've been in radio, and I've been in radio all my life, is I think we were used to being led by very sort of Henry V kind of characters who would get on their horse and say, "Once more into the breach, dear friends, this is the way forward," and lead from the front. And I think you can't do that anymore. You are probably having to lead 4, maybe 5 different generations of staff, and each have a different view of what leadership should be. Some do want you to tell me what to do, and I'll do it, and I'll get you that back to you. Others, they'll go, "You want me to do what? No, I don't want to do that. I'd rather do this, thank you very much indeed. And actually, can I see your boss's boss? Because I've got a great idea." So leadership has got to change, and I think it's more now about being a shepherd and guiding your flock and listening to your flock and being able to see where they want to go, what ideas they've got, and being able to give them the opportunity to see that through.
Now you've had a chance to kind of reflect on your times working in these radio stations and radio groups. You can look across other radio brands perhaps as well. What's the biggest mistake that you see when radio brands are trying to grow their audience and you go, "I'm not sure I'd do it like that"?
You want me to be rude, don't you?
Go on, be a bit provocative.
Okay, the biggest mistake radio is making, and I know there's another session about this down the corridor, is that we assume that young audiences are all about new music. It used to be the way since Elvis and the 50s that new music represented that new generation, which fought against the last generation and kicked against it and rebelled against it. And whether that was Elvis and his hips shaking them, or whether that was punk rock, or whether that was dancing in a nightclub, it was about representing young people, that generation that was different from the generation before it. And I think the biggest mistake is saying, if you want to attract young audiences, you just play new music. Well, new music is actually the Arctic Monkeys or the Smiths or, Kate Bush or David Bowie. New music, now that, you don't just have your parents' record collection, you have the entire history of music on your phone, on that weapon of mass distraction. And so actually, why would you play a new track that's, I'll sort of be rude, is rubbish compared to one of the best ever tracks from Queen?
Right.
So I think the biggest mistake is actually in the music policies of some stations, where they are not from their own fault, but through regulation, through maybe sort of government or legislators that say, "Oh yeah, young people, you need to pay 50% new music." Well, what's your definition of new music?
Okay, so old music can be new music if it's the first time you've heard it. We got lots of kind of leaders of radio stations, program directors in the room, senior producers, all sorts of people. Give us your take on how you handle pushback when you're trying to introduce a new idea or strategy to your radio station? So you got your team, you got this great idea, we're going to do this initiative, and you start to hear the murmurs in the corridors, oh, we're not so sure about that. How have you handled that, trying to sell in a new concept or a different way of working for a team?
So, two things. I think, first of all, it's about the strength of your story. If there's pushback, then maybe you haven't told the story as clearly as you possibly can. I went on a management course, and it was an international management course, and I was sat next to someone in Nigerian oil, who worked in Nigeria in the oil companies, and also a lady from a Japanese cosmetic company. And at first, you sat down thinking, I have no idea what we've got in common. But actually, you realize over the week, it doesn't matter whether you're in the oil industry or the cosmetic industry, you are trying to get a group of people from A to B. And it's about the strength of your story. So one, check your story. Is it convincing? Does it ring true? Is it based on insight? And then second thing is, if there is still pushback on that, listen. And ask why. But don't just ask why once, ask why 3 times. And maybe don't be in the room when that question's being asked. Maybe get groups of people in your team to have sort of breakout groups and do it amongst the peers. You'll get a much more honest conversation and a much more honest reason of why.
Have we got any questions in the room for Ben? This is everyone's being... Oh, no, we have. There's a hand straight up. I love it. There's a hand straight up. Let's get a microphone to, if you could tell us who you are, sir, and where you're from, that would be great, and far away.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Talal al-Shahri, I'm from Sultanate of Oman. I run a couple of radio stations, public service stations. And I'm very curious in regards to your talk on attention spans and how that's changing and how that we have to stay up to date with what's going on. I'm interested in your thoughts on how radio segments have been getting shorter and shorter in some cases, that they follow the formula of trying to stick within the attention span of people these days. Is doing that the right thing in your opinion, or should we look at it in a different angle when it comes to how long segments are, or how long you stick to a topic? That's my question. Thank you.
Great question.
You and I were talking about this earlier, weren't we?
We were indeed.
I worked with a presenter called Chris Moyles in the UK who would talk, sometimes his links would be 10, 15 minutes sometimes. And when I came down to see him after the show, he'd go, yeah, I might have been running late, but I was sounding great. It was hard conversation. So 2 things. One, I think it's about the story and making sure that you're telling a story that is interesting and you're teasing ahead to that story. How many times have you listened to a radio station, and we're all the same, aren't we? Whenever we're driving in the car and we're with our partners and our partner's talking, as soon as the record ends, we've got one ear on our partner, but we've also got one ear on the link. Okay, it's just me. But I think some formats are boring. Some formats are going, we're going to play you 6 great tunes in a row. You're like, really? I can do that on Spotify.
Yeah.
It's the stories that go around the music. I'm going to play you a record from the greatest selling artist of 1983. Oh, who's that then? Oh, I wonder who that is. Even that is just a short tease of the section. So, again, I think it comes back to the quality of storytelling and the passion in those stories. But the other thing I would also say is we seem to, again, when it comes to young audiences, say they haven't got an attention span. It's 8 seconds and then it's gone, etc. If you really know young people, you'll know that they would quite happily watch 3 Harry Potter films back to back and not move off the sofa all day. They would watch a Minecraft video on YouTube that's 2 hours long if there wasn't a fight for the TV amongst the family. Yeah. So I think I think it's a myth about attention span. I think it's make the story. This was the piece of advice that I was given when I first came into radio, and I asked how long should this package be, this interview be. make it as long as it's interesting.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Any more questions from the... Yes, we have one down here. This is where I know you're going to have to... It's like a gentle Sunday little jog. She's fresh from the half marathon. Here she is, jogging in with the microphone. Who are you and where are you from?
Hi, I'm Søren from Danish Commercial Radio. You mentioned the importance of local content at Bauer. Can you explore more on that?
Yeah, it's a bit of a quandary, isn't it, when we're hearing in the radio industry, and I'm sure over the next few days we'll hear about consolidation, we'll hear about job losses, in both America and Australia. It's really difficult, isn't it? And the stories that people tell and the different ways that it's changing. I noticed there was a great story about Denmark in the last couple of days that the Danish postal service is now going to stop sending letters. Is that right?
After 400 years.
Yeah, you're one of the oldest post services in the world, and you're going to stop sending it. But that's, again, sending stories by letters no more. Sorry, off the point. In terms of localness, it does break my heart when I see some of the opportunities I was afforded on local radio stations to do the overnights or to do the early breakfast shows, because that was where I learnt my trade. So I do wonder where we're going to find the next set of great radio broadcasters from. So that is a worry of mine. But secondly, it's the way of the world. The accountants are in control, unfortunately, and they will look for economies of scale. But as long as we can hold on to those local news bulletins and those local bits of information, whether that be weather or travel, etc., as long as we've got moments in the clock that connect us to that area, then I think we'll be okay.
You were talking about young people in the industry where they're getting their break. If you were starting afresh today, what advice would you give your former self, your younger self, starting today? Because it's different. You can't go and do New Year's overnights in BBC Hereford and Worcester and all that kind of stuff. So advice for people at the beginning of their career would be?
If you want to be a broadcaster, broadcast. So if you can't get on the radio, you have many ways now of broadcasting yourself. Again, it's, can you practice being a brilliant storyteller? If you can tell a story on a YouTube channel, if you can tell a story on Instagram or TikTok, then practice and hone your skills of that tease, of that start, middle, and end. That's what I would do.
All about the storytelling. Any more from the room? Everyone's like, oh, okay. The one key thing every programmer should be thinking about in 2025 is...
AI.
Really?
Yep, absolutely. I was at a meeting the other day, or just before Christmas, and there was someone saying, oh yes, we've managed to make a whole of our radio station AI. We've managed to, the AI programs the music, it programs the adverts, it programs the travel and the weather. We pull the travel and the weather from online, and it creates the voice that can then voice it up, and also our news bulletins. And that to me is terrifying.
It's a bit depressing, isn't it?
Well, it puts us all out of a job if that's the way forward. But do other human beings really want that? I don't think they do. I believe AI can be brilliant at... There was a great quote someone said the other day that my wife told me. She said, I'm told how amazing AI is, but is AI going to be able to wash the dishes and do the laundry? I want it to do those jobs. I want it to do the boring shit, you know. If AI can do the boring jobs in radio and free up the humans to be creative and tell better stories, then fantastic. Let's use it and let's, fantastic, let's have it. But as I said, I'm really worried, and I recommend you read that book that I talked about at the beginning about how AI will be ruled by algorithms and who controls the algorithms and the platforms that control the algorithms. So when it's radio news that's made by AI, it's not really your news.
we spent time talking about success, about work-life balance, all of those things, how they come together in leadership and all that. Best piece of career advice that you've been given, Ben? Did someone share a real nugget which you can share with our fine people in the summit today, and they can go, yeah, that's a good piece of advice?
I can remember the worst piece of advice.
Start with that one.
I definitely remember that. And it was the program controller, and this shows how old I was. So I went in to see the program controller who just chain smoked the whole day through in his office. So you went through this fug of nicotine cloud to get to his desk, and he had the big desk, and you're sat down on the sofa that you continually sink down into. Yeah. And he said, Ben, just remember, best piece of advice I can give you, don't ad-lib, it's a minefield.
Okay.
What? What, you want me to script everything?
Right.
So that was the worst piece of advice.
Yeah.
The best piece of advice is the best piece of advice for life, which is treat others how you would like to be treated. I think that has to be the best piece of advice for anyone, whether it's be at work or be at home or being in the family environment. And it's difficult, and people say, oh yeah, but you've got to sack people sometimes. You've got to make really difficult decisions. But how would you like to be treated in that situations? We all know that businesses will have to maybe lose jobs, etc. Can you do it with dignity? Can you do it with thought? Can you do it with kindness? And I think that's the best piece of advice I think you can get in life.
It's a lovely sentiment to end on. Please thank Mr. Ben Cooper. Okay. Good news, we have more stuff coming up. I'm going to tease ahead to Dennis Clark, who will be on this stage in approximately 7 or 8 minutes' time, okay? So don't go far. If you need a toilet, there's a toilet at the end of the corridor, left and right, men and women, etc. But if you want to hang out here, give us 5 minutes. We'll reset the stage, and Dennis Clark will be on this stage, okay? Stay where you are.